Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. I have a very interesting episode and guest lined up for you today. This is an episode and a topic that we have never covered in almost 500 episodes of the podcast. So I'm looking forward to this. I would love to welcome Mr. Adam ISENBERG from the NAW. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, Jason. Glad to be here.
It is so exciting to have you along for the ride today. You work in an organization and in an area that is near and dear to my heart as a B2B digital commerce consultant, and working with so many manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors in the space and helping them go through a process of digital transformation and making them relevant to their buyers today. What's interesting, because Forrester came out with a report at the end of last year showing that 71% of B2B buyers today are now either millennials or Gen Z. So the reality is we are moving from a place of kind of the old school wholesale distribution model with kind of the old school relationships and into a place where lots of people working in the industry today are now digital natives, right? And that is a massive shift. But before we get into NAW, what it is, what it does, what role it fulfills in the industry, how did you get into this space?
Oh, Jason, what fantastic question. Thank you so much for having me today. I've always, in my career in 25 years, I've been a business development executive my entire time. And I've always had a affinity for government affairs and the work that people do here in Washington, D.C., and how it impacts business by and large on a national, from coast to coast kind of scale. Because when you look at what's going on, it's horrible to say, but what's going on either in California or in Seattle or in Florida or in Texas or in New York, those companies and those businesses and those executives are all focusing on what's right in front of them. They really don't have a wherewithal about the impact that what happens here in the nation's capital is actually going to impact their business, their people, their processes, one way, shape, or form. So that's always been my forte, being here in the DC area since the mid 80s. What I found in NAW is a way that I had the ability to communicate a value proposition, communicate some tools, some strategies, but also some protection through a membership valuation, through some e-commerce platforms, through some partnerships and some thought leadership outlets to a virtually invisible, up until COVID, $8.2 trillion industry being wholesale distribution. And when you think about that, when you think about what happened in 2020, right? In 2019, nobody knew really about distribution. Nobody, unless you were within the industry. Now, some industry statistics for you are a little mind-boggling in that distribution generates $8.2 trillion of revenue. We're 25% of the US GDP. We're double the amount of revenue than retail, but everybody knows CVS and all your local stores and Walgreens and Kroger and Walmart and things like that. But then again, when you look at manufacturing, the 3Ms of the world, the DuPonts, the Budweisers, everybody knows who's making our products. Wholesale distribution, manufacturing employs 1 out of 9. So you're looking at an industry that if we never had vaccine distribution and we never had that talk track in late 2020 and early 21, nobody would still be talking about how the supply chain functions. They just know that when I need tissues and I go to CVS, tissues are right there. Or when I want to celebrate with my friends and I want to go get a beer at my local bar or my restaurant, the maitre d' doesn't have to call St. Louis and say, hey, Budweiser, I need a couple more 30 packs. I have a party coming in tonight. So understanding how supply chain works and the people and the businesses that make all of our goods and services and the things that we consume as Americans every day possible is something that I've just marveled in for the past 12 years.
What an introduction. And just for those that don't know, I assume most in my audience will have heard of the NAW. For those that haven't, National Association of Wholesaler Distributors. Yeah. And you guys act as effectively a nexus, like an industry body that helps support wholesale distribution across the whole of the United States. You help to support the industry You help to advocate on behalf of the industry. You run events on behalf of the industry. You create thought leadership around the industry. You create marketing and branding around the industry. I wouldn't. You're not like the Teamsters in the sense that you're not creating a scenario where people become members so that they can get a better wage or better working conditions. But what you do is you help advocate on behalf of the business of wholesale distribution at the
Yep.
most senior levels in Washington, right? And so basically you make sure that the industry has all of the, I guess, regulatory tools at its disposal and it's not over-regulated. You make sure that the free market is operating in the way that it should be operating. You advocate for that middle tier. As you talk about, wholesale distribution is the unsung heroes, really, of the supply chain, right? We have and if we look at it as a pyramid, we might have 1,000 retailers down here at the bottom of the pyramid. We might have 100 distributors sitting in the middle of the pyramid, and we might have 10 or 20 or 50 manufacturers sitting above them. And so the most visible parts of the supply chain are where they hit the consumer. But there's this fat middle, as I like to call it, which is wholesale distribution that does the heavy lift to get products from where they originate, whether that's within the United States or somewhere overseas, and getting it ultimately into the consumer's hands. And whether that consumer is a retail consumer or whether they're a business consumer, wholesale distribution is the glue that ties the manufacturers to the consumers of those goods.
So that's a great point. And the one thing that I just want to highlight in the history of NAW is that this trade association was founded in 1946. It was founded in 1946 because 6 or 7 other individual trade associations, whether it being plumbing and HVAC, flooring, electrical, alcohol, grocery, they all got together and they said, we're lobbying the government on things that are horizontal in nature. Why don't we stand up an organization, another association that does horizontal advocacy and let us focus in on our vertical lanes and really be experts in our specific individual commodity lines, but yet have this national entity that is advocating on behalf of the entire industry. And you're absolutely right in that the work that our government affairs team does here in Washington, D.C. for the entire distribution industry. It doesn't matter if you're a $10 million plumbing distributor in Topeka, Kansas, or Granger and Ferguson, ABC Supply, Beacon Roofing, Uline, MSC Industrial, and the likes. You're all going to be impacted by labor policies, by tax policies, by regulations that deal with sometimes climate change or DEI. And what our advocacy team is masters at is understanding what legislation, and honestly now more often than not, are going to be impacting our distributor businesses either advantageously or hurting their bottom line because of overbearing regulations, additional red tape that they have to go through, and sometimes overreach, whereby there was a Scope 3 SEC filing that was going to make distributors and other manufacturers be able to have to report out where their product was coming from and the impact on the climate that it was going to be. And NAW filed an amicus brief and took it to court and said, you know what, this is something that is not going to be feasible for the business community. And we got a very nice victory in that late last year. So it's something that our government affairs team continues to look at, both legislation and regulation, on how it's impacting distributors, how it's impacting the supply chain and businesses in general. And we're advocating for those things that are less cumbersome and make supply chains flow easier.
And I guess to your point, compliance is, for most businesses, compliance is not a minor footnote. It is a significant line item in their cost of doing business. And obviously, the more we can deregulate smartly, I don't say it doesn't need to be a complete free-for-all, but I think that I'd love to get your take on the thoughts of both you as an organization and your membership in terms of moving from a Biden-led administration right now to a Donald Trump-led administration again, and obviously with Doge and everything else, it feels like there's a sea change happening in Washington. Maybe it's window dressing, maybe it's not, but it certainly seems that the new administration has at least recognized that there's a problem. They've recognized that there's no policy within the American government that when a new law or new regulation is introduced, that an old one gets deprecated. So what happens ultimately is that every single area of society becomes grossly overregulated over time, just naturally.
Correct.
Lawmakers are there to make laws. That's what they're there to do. And then we have the shadow government, which is the administrative government in the background, which doesn't get voted on. And they oftentimes are in office for decades at a time. And oftentimes those regulations which get handed down administratively, which aren't passed by acts of Congress, for example, but that's how industries become overregulated, because people in these roles of trying to regulate an industry, it's their job to think about ways to regulate their industries and to raise cash for the government in the process in many instances. And so there is this risk. I think there's always a danger with big government, so to speak. There's always a danger of overregulation. There's always a danger of putting so much burden of compliance cost onto industry that it basically makes certain industries completely unviable. And so it feels like one of the major roles you guys must play by definition is to try to make sure that businesses can operate efficiently and sustainably without too much oversight, without too much regulation. And it feels like that is a major role you have to fulfill as part of your duties to your members.
That's an outstanding question, and you're absolutely right. And when you look at congressional pasts and and the founders were brilliant when they set up this project, this thought, this idea of self-governing country being the United States of America. And they said, you know what, we're going to devise this plan with 3 individual branches of government, right? Let's all remember our 10th grade civics class where you have one branch write the laws, one branch execute the laws, and one branch say, are the laws just? Do they fit what we're trying to accomplish here in our founding documents? Unfortunately, in the past 10 years or so, one of those branches decided to stop coming to work. And when you look at the number of legislation, when you look at the number of bills passed and executed in Congress for the 117th and 118th Congress specifically, it was the lowest in history. I think they passed 15 or 20 pieces of legislation versus, say, 150 in the 115th Congress or the 113th Congress with President George W. Bush and President Obama under those governments. So in the absence of legislation, things have to get done in Washington. So then the onus falls on the executive branch. And now you're starting to see a lot more overregulation and bureaucracy really expanding. And what NAW does better than I've seen in the past 10 years in my time here is the way that Brian Wild and his team, Brian Wild's our Chief Government Affairs Officer, what he has been able to do with his team is isolate and understand where regulations are overreaching, where they are impacting our distributors, and where we can win in court to say, wait a minute, Mr. and Mrs. Government official, you're regulating an industry that you have no idea about. Where, for instance, there's something pertaining to a warehouse walkaround rule or a worker protection act. So this is an idea that a lot of people in government think that big box stores and other types of e-commerce retailers might not be doing a great job with worker safety and time cards and things like that in their warehouses. So they're going to blanket everybody in a warehouse protection kind of regulation. So we are now on the offense by saying, hey, you're impacting people that operate distributorships and warehouses throughout the country, and you don't even know what they do. We have to now educate the regulators on, hey, this is what this regulation is going to do. It's going to severely impact how our people can recruit talent, how our people can pay their talent, how our people can operate successfully and flow goods through the supply chain efficiently, and not having such costly regulations that obviously they're going to pass along to the consumer, which then hurts consumer spending and consumer confidence, which is an overall drag on the economy. So what NAW does is really educate the incoming administration more than they did the outgoing administration. But the American people for a long time have been fed up and they're really angry with government. So they've continued to throw the guys out and throw the girls out. As my father, a child of the 60s, says, we don't need term limits in Congress. If you don't like them, you vote them out. Well, that's great, Dad. But when you vote them out, the new people coming in don't have an idea about how this place, Washington, D.C. works. So it makes almost my government affairs team's jobs harder, because the people that are coming in from outside of this bubble being D.C., they want to start to make change and they want to do things. And that's really admirable and it's great. And we love to work with those leaders that want to impact our industry. But when you have something that is as blanket as some of the regulations and some of the legislation that came out of the Biden administration, it's, wait a minute, you guys are doing things that are vastly different than what we've done before. We're going to have to educate you and re-educate you on how this is impacting our business. And the one thing that everybody is geared up for, I think in 25, is a lot of the tax provisions that President Trump pushed through with his first 2017 tax bill. Some of those tax provisions are going to sunset at the end of 25. So we're all in DC gearing up for a tax debate. What NAW did masterfully in 2017 was we educated the Trump administration about how 80% of our members are still S corps, and they're still family-owned businesses, and they're still privately held companies. They're not operating in the effective tax rate as a C corp. So when you look at the effective tax rate that the Trump administration put out in 2017, the corporate rate was, they first started at 22, 21%, where the S corps and the pass-through businesses were up to, I want to say it was almost 38%. Wow. And our chief lobbyist at the time, she was a Washington veteran. Jade West is a household name here at NAW industry and in Washington, D.C. And her fight and our former CEO, Dirk Van Dongen's fight, was to get almost rate parity for the tax bill in 2017. We didn't get rate parity, Jason. The corporate tax rate now, I think, is 21.5%, and the S corp rate is about 26% or 27%. So we got it closer than where they first started. But that goes back to that re-education of government officials about the impact of what they're doing to try to better us all and how it's going to affect the businesses that are NAW members and distributors from coast to coast.
I think, to your point, a lot of legislation falls under this bucket, or what I would like to call the law of unintended consequences, right? Congress, for example, they think, just as an example, maybe they think that Amazon isn't doing right by their warehouse workers and that they're not concerned about their safety or whatever it might be. Now, they might try to pass a law or make some regulatory changes with Amazon in mind, but they may not realize downstream all the other hundreds and thousands of businesses that are much smaller than Amazon and have much lesser ability to comply with government regulations, much less ability to comply with the cost of complying with those regulations. And so, unfortunately, we have a situation where even with well-intentioned laws, even with well-intentioned regulations, even with things with the purest of intent, the issue is that there are so many downstream unintended consequences in it, and it would literally be impossible for regulators to understand all of those downstream consequences without organizations like yours enlightening them to those downstream consequences. And so I think some regulations feel punitive, some of them feel retaliatory, whatever it might be. But I think in most instances, not all, but certainly in most instances, there are at least some form of good intention behind a lot of regulations. But it is those downstream impacts that are so hard to assess. And the problem is that, as you rightly pointed out, many regulations are inherently inflationary. Just because of the added costs of compliance. Now, as you rightly point out, those are going to get pushed right downstream, or at least in industries where they can pass on the costs. Otherwise, if the market won't bear them passing on the costs, those industries go away. Those businesses literally go away. If they cannot figure out a way to become sustainable, they go away. But in businesses where they can pass on the costs, they do. And so therefore, that it's not just how much money the government is printing. It's not just how much money the Fed is pumping into the economy that's inflationary, but it's also regulation. Regulation is almost always inherently inflationary. And conversely, and I think Elon Musk has been very eloquent about this, and I think he's been very good at communicating this back to the American public around what Doge's imperative is as an organization, right? As an extra governmental organization, is that you will get deflationary effects. If you can remove regulation, 9 times out of 10, deregulation is deflationary because it reduces costs out of the entire business environment. And he's been very clear about the additional cost and time, and not only the cost and time of compliance, but the opportunity cost of not being able to move his businesses forward because of, in many instances, for example, in the case of SpaceX, he's got 3 or 4 separate regulatory bodies that are ruling different aspects of his business. And sometimes their regulations are in conflict with each other. And so
Right.
if he complies with one, it automatically means he's going to fall out of compliance with another. So he's in the most horrible form of catch-22 situation. And as a person who runs very large businesses within the United States, he is perfectly placed to understand that catch-22 situation. And I think you guys are too. And I think this is a very important function that you fulfill.
Yeah, the one point I want to emphasize that you brought up is the inability sometimes for small to medium-sized businesses to comply with over cumbersome regulation. And we don't think that the government should be in the business of picking winners and losers in business. That this is a free market enterprise, and we all grew up with the additive that you stand up, you get knocked down, you pick yourself back up by your bootstraps, and you move on about your way as Americans. And I think that the NAW stance has always been a way to look at free market enterprise as a way that is best for the country, is best for our members, and we want to remove as many cumbersome and burdensome regulations and legislation that impacts distribution, that impacts the supply chain, and that is the best for the American people.
Now, you guys, in addition to all the things that you do in terms of education, in terms of advocacy, in terms of training, you've got your own management academy, you've got leadership programs, you do lots of things to level up the capability of your membership cohort. But you also, in addition to that, you have your executive summit, which you do every year. As I understand it, you do it every single year around the end of January every year. And so you've got your summit coming up January 27th to 29th in Washington, D.C. this year. And I think you mentioned off air that you expect this to be the largest summit you have ever held.
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning that. We're really excited about this. Since joining NAW in 2012, the strategy has always been to highlight the distribution industry at our annual event. And we would do that in a variety of different ways, whether they're political leaders coming and speaking, whether they're thinkers and educators and inspirational topics and presenters on our stages. And since Eric Hopland took the reins in October of 2020, what I can say without a doubt is that the production value, the level of energy that he and our executive team brings to the table are things that I haven't seen in 10 years here. And when you look at distribution and when you look at the men and women in the trenches doing the hard work, so remember, when we go back to COVID, boxes still need to get shipped. Things still need to get packaged. So supplies still need to stock our shelves. We were all in a global pandemic and we didn't know how to function with that. Some of us had the luxuries of staying home and staying with our families and staying safe. Our NAW members were at the front lines. Our NAW members were out there making sure that we had supplies for our families. And when you look at the executive summit, it's a great way to celebrate those men and women throughout the industry and the accomplishments that they had over the past year. But also, Jason, what I've come to understand and what I've come to really love about the direction our trade association is taking is the best and the brightest in our industry come to the executive summit because they don't want to see distribution in the next 2 to 5 years. They want to see what distribution looks like in the next 5 to 10 years. They're not looking down the street. They're looking down the street and around the corner. And because of the programming that we have, because of the cohort sessions that we have, because of the different leaders and the different ways that we're going to challenge the status quo on how to run a distributorship with e-commerce, with digital transformation, with AI, we're going to look at what's innovating other industries and say, distributors, we understand you're on, by and large, as an industry, a 2% gross margin business. We understand that it's hard to adopt new technologies. It's hard to adopt new processes. When my great-grandfather started this business in the 40s after the war, then my dad took it over, or my grandfather took it over in the 50s. Now my dad ran it in the 70s. Now my uncle ran it in the 90s. And now I'm running it here as a 5th generation ISENBERG, if you would. But if we're going to implement a piece of technology, that's really scary, because if it misses, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make payroll. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my suppliers. I don't know. So when people come to the executive summit and listen to the educational sessions that we have and some of the practitioners that are in our exhibit halls, and they say, hey, we have a focus in distribution. We know your business. We can help you. It makes the conversations with those distribution leaders so much easier because they're looking at a partner instead of somebody just trying to sell them a software or sell them a new shiny robot. It's, oh, you understand our business. You understand what makes us special. Let me work a little bit more with you. And that happens at the NAW Executive Summit.
And what's really interesting about this is that you point out something that is part and parcel of what I do every single day. I'm consulting to manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors about digital transformation, about digital commerce, about punch out, about EDI, about self-service e-commerce, about the digital services layer. And it's about how do we effectively bridge the gap between where a distributor is today and where they need to be to stay relevant tomorrow. And as we pointed out, the buying demographic has changed, which means the selling demographic has to change. We now have more digital natives on the buy side than we've ever had before in the B2B world. And so therefore, and as you rightly point out, probably, I would say, greater than 80% of the businesses that I work with in the distribution sector, they are family-owned businesses. And in most instances, they're second, third, and in some cases, fourth generation family-owned businesses. So the reality is that when granddad or great-granddad started this business, or grandmother, they weren't digital natives. And so they have maybe done things the way they've always done them. They've said, hey, our relationship is built on relationships. Our entire business is built on relationships. We have a regular call cycle. We have reps that go and see our customers. We have reps that take them to boozy lunches. We take them to ball games. We have a relationship. We know their kids. We go to the bar mitzvahs. We go to all these things. And the thing is that what I believe, and sometimes when I'm brought in by executives, and sometimes it's the great grandchild of the founder who's now taken over, and then maybe they're the COO now, or maybe they're the CTO now, or maybe they're the CEO now of these distribution businesses. And they're digital natives themselves. And so they logically ask the question, why are we so far behind, right? In order to stay relevant and in order to grow our business, we have to become tech savvy. We have to become digitally led. We have to become digital first businesses, but they don't necessarily know where to start. And this is the challenge, right? They know they have to do it. They know they want to do it. Maybe even they have the budget to do it, but they don't know where to start. And that's why I think B2B historically has been anywhere from 5 to 10 years behind the traditional retail sector in terms of digital transformation. But I tell you, and I'd love your thoughts on this, what I realized, especially during COVID, was that B2B businesses, a tremendous amount of B2B businesses, got digital religion during COVID because their field sales teams couldn't go and see customers. They couldn't go and physically see them on site. They couldn't go and visit them on job sites. They couldn't be out there in the industry, going and meeting with people, knocking on new doors, executing new business, landing new accounts. They couldn't do all those things. And they realized, geez, if we don't figure out some very serious digital routes to market, we are going to be in deep trouble. And so I personally think that while COVID was bad in many respects, it was fantastic from a realization perspective that these businesses better get digital religion. Otherwise, they may not have a business.
So that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. And Jason, you're 100% right. And I use the additive by saying your distribution sales rep that came up in the 70s, the 80s, that brought you donuts every Friday, picked up your POs. You're right. We coached baseball together. Our kids went to dance together. We're both at church together. That guy and that gal, they might have died, both physically and their role and
professionally.
They're professional, because what distributors are facing now is what we're trying to push our members to do is not be a commodity, because a commodity can be replaced by automation. It can be replaced by another supplier, whatever it is. The relationships that our members have with their customers and with their suppliers, and you're going to see this a lot in your manufacturing clients, I'm sure, is that they don't want to break bulk. They don't want to hold a lot of inventory. They don't want to service a part. So when you look at a distributorship that's holding a ton of inventory, thousands of SKUs, have hundreds and thousands of different customers buying from them every day, they need to do this as efficient and as cost-effective as possible. And by using technologies that are specific to their business is going to make them more profitable, is going to make their customers happier, is going to make their manufacturer partners happier. It's going to make everybody happier. But to your point, that blank piece of paper that we all look at when we start a project and we go, this is impossible. And the one kind of assimilation that I look at is saying, I'm going to stand you on the beach and I'm going to say, go boil the ocean. And that's what distributors feel like when they're talking about implementing punch out, implementing e-com, implementing AI, implementing Salesforce and things like that. It's, wait a minute, you want me to boil the ocean? I'm terrified. let's just do it the way we already did it. So instead, and this is, again, I got to give him credit. When Eric came in and he looked and he saw what was going on in retail and everybody's doing fun stuff and great stuff at NRF. And then you look at what NAM and the manufacturers are doing. And it's like, you have people in Silicon Valley, in Nashville, in Atlanta, in Austin. They're innovating for businesses. How come nobody's innovating for the business that are connecting the businesses? So what we did smartly is we partnered with a firm that is very forward in the tech space, knows distribution, and we said, we want to create a South by Southwest for distribution. And what does that mean? That means that every year we invite 8 to 12 new tech firms that are either VC, PE, or bootstrap backed that have really innovative technologies that are focused on B2B. And we bring them to our Innovator Summit and we allow distributors to come in, hear pitches from these tech CEOs. And then if they like what they hear, they're able to actually set up one-on-one meetings with the distributors that the distributors pick. And me being Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships now, some of the people that I work with most closely every day being our service providers, our technologists, they're like, we want to contact the distributors. I go, I know that what we do here. We allow the distributors to say, hey, I'm interested in your e-commerce platform. Hey, I'm interested in your mobile communication platform. Hey, I'm interested in how your technology is going to be able to scrub my ERP for duplicate data because I have this manufacturer sending me SKUs in one line, and I have this manufacturer sending me SKUs, the same SKU in a different kind of code and verbiage. Right, in a format, thank you. And it's so now this technology is able to meld them together, make sure that they're not duplicate so that it eliminates human error. And the one thing that I think technology is going to be able to do for distributors is not replace people, but augment their skill set in the way that they're going to be able to do more value add type of services and solutions and jobs and less manual labor and less kind of fat thumbing, if you would, to eliminate some of those problems and some of those hiccups that we all face in our day-to-day lives in business. But distributors, because of their time crunch and because of their low margin expertise, they don't have the ability to get away with so many of those errors. So when you have a technology that is able to automate some of the things that manually we used to do, I think that the distributors are going to be way better off 2, 3, 5 years down the road. And when they turn around and look at all the cost savings, all the labor savings, and all the successes that the technologies can bring, they're just going to be a win. And NAW is really at the forefront of doing that by understanding what technologies are focused in on B2B specifically and how they can benefit our members, regardless of what they're pushing through the warehouse. And that's one of the other things that I think is really captivating about the NAW value proposition is that if you're doing material handling, amazing. There's great companies that are focusing on doing material handling. If you're doing pharmaceuticals or alcohol, highly regulated industries, amazing. There's great technologies to do that as well. When you look at NAW, we have partners and we have technologists and we have innovators that are horizontal in nature. So it doesn't matter what product you're moving through your warehouse. The people that are attracted by the NAW value proposition, they don't want to be the best plumbing distributor. They don't want to be the best electrical distributor. They don't want to be the best flooring distributor. They want to be the best distributor, period, where our really kind of secret sauce lies.
I want to double click on one of those things that you said just a couple of minutes ago, which I think is that even setting AI aside for the moment, I think that historically when I go in and I start consulting to a lot of these wholesale distributors, there is a fear, not always, but I would say greater than 90% of the time when I go in, I'm seen by sales and ops as the devil. And CSRs in particular and sales teams in particular. They're like, oh, great, you're going to bring in the robots and replace us. You're going to take away our commissions, aren't you? Everything that goes through a punch out or everything that goes through EDI or everything that goes through self-service e-commerce, I'm not going to get my commissions on that anymore, am I? And it's no, actually, hang on a second. And realistically, when I get in there, if I can get even 10 minutes with a sales team, what I might come in as the devil, but I'll leave as their best friend because I am a massive advocate for sales teams. I am a massive advocate for CSRs. I'm a massive advocate for relationship building. But what I'm not an advocate of is sales teams and CSRs having to do manual admin tasks that are better done by a machine. And I don't know a single sales rep or CSR out there that likes admin work, right?
No.
Admin work and in the work that I do, where I go in and I'm consulting to these distributors, for the distributors that track salesperson's time by task, anywhere, we see this as an average, somewhere between 20 and 60% of the average sales rep's time is spent on admin tasks. Doesn't benefit the customer and doesn't benefit them, and it doesn't make them any more commission. So the reality is, if I can let them do what they do best, which is to go on knock on more doors, which is to go and have more in-person meetings with the clients that matter, to be able to increase the amount of calls they can make in a call cycle, to be able to go out there and have a conversation with them, hey, we've got this new range, we've got this new category, we've got these new products, or conversely ask them, say, what do we not supply you today that we should be supplying you? What don't we supply to you today that we could supply you? Let's have that conversation. Can we expand our SKU count? Can we bring in some exclusive lines just for you? These are the kind of conversations that sales reps are perfectly placed to have with their customers. But if they're spending 20 to 60% of their time doing crappy admin tasks, which means, okay, in some industries, literally there are customers on a building site, they'll write something on the back of a roofing tile and they'll take a photo of it and they'll send a photo of what they need via WhatsApp to their sales rep and say, hey, can you get this order keyed in for me? Okay, that's a manual task that these salespeople are doing all day, every single day. They receive an email with an attachment with a spreadsheet and they say, hey, can you put this order in for me? Well, if we can automate all of the dumb tasks that actually don't add any value, then all of a sudden it frees up time for these very valuable individuals, the ones with the institutional knowledge, the ones with the tribal knowledge in the business of, oh, hey, cool, you've ordered something, we're out of stock, but this product, which has exactly the same attributes as this other product that you've ordered, however, let's say it's a belt. Okay, it's half of an inch longer, but we know the application this is going into has an idler pulley. So this is actually a substitute for you. These are the kind of conversations that really good sales reps can have with customers. But if they're so freaking busy doing stupid stuff, then they never have the time to do these things. And so these are the kind of conversations I'm having with distributors to help them understand if we can automate away the painful part of the operational side of your business using technology, whilst also creating a better buying and shopping experience for your customer, then it's a win-win all the way around. Everybody wins. You lower your costs. You can go out and win new customers with the same size sales force you have today, and you can service them with the exact same size sales force you have today and service them at a higher level, and you're going to claw back a little bit of margin at the same time. And these are the kind of exciting discussions I'm able to have.
So, Jason, you touched on a few things there. And again, being a business development professional for over 20 years, that's what gets me excited to come to work every day, is that when I love putting people in positions to be successful, right? Whether it's my individual team, whether it's NAW as an organization, whether it's our members, and I look at what Infor is doing, what Proton AI is doing, what SAP is doing, what Oracle's doing, what ProKeep is doing, what OneRail is doing on the last mile delivery and Curry. And I look at so many of the things that our technologies are providing our distributor members. And you know what? Just distribution is nothing but a logistics and sales masterful type business. So if you were to come into my sales force and me as a sales rep and you go, Adam, I'm going to make it easier for you, not only to enter in orders, but also to cross-sell and upsell your current accounts and your new business properties. What do you think? I'd say, Jason, let's have a real conversation, because I'm about making money, and I'm about making money for me and my family. I'm about making money for my organization and driving efficiencies. And when you look at some of the technologies that are out there, and you're right, it is a lot of education about, you've done an amazing job farming this 20% of your book of business that gets us 80% of your revenue. That's great. However, you don't need to do it that way anymore. And with 2 or 3 different technologies and 2 or 3 different levers that you can pull, it's impossible. It's impossible for some of the CSRs that we have in our membership to understand their entire catalog. They have hundreds of thousands of SKUs. It's impossible.
Millions in some instances.
Some instances, you're absolutely right. But if you are on a call with a customer either existing and or new business. And they're telling you, I like this, I like that, and I like this. And the computer and the AI or the e-commerce model or whatever technology is feeding your back end can make highly customizable, highly intelligent suggestions that you as the sales rep or the CSR can say, hey, Jason, I know you buy tongue depressors because you're a dentist's office. Do you also buy cotton swabs? Oh yeah, Adam, we buy cotton swabs all the time. Oh, do you know that we have them and I can just include them in your order? Oh, I didn't know that. It's just those types of personalized conversations that technology is going to be able to equip the sales professional and the CSR better than ever before, which drives productivity, which drives profitability, which makes inventory turns that much easier. And when distributors come back and look and say, wow, I can't believe we did it this way 5 years ago, and now we're doing it this way, and we've grown by 20%, our EBITDA is up, our retention is up, our turnover is down, our people are happier, our customers are flocking to us, and our share of wallet with our customers are increasing. And it's all because we didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater. We're still the same company that was founded in 1953 or in 1923 or in 1903 in some cases. But the services, the expertise, and the solutions that we're providing our customers are that much more targeted, are that much more personalized, which means that I don't care what Amazon does or any of the other big box stores, those are low cost type transactions. Mm-hmm. Our distributors are in the relationship business. So when you look at a relationship and you go, you know what? You, Mr. and Mrs. Distributor, understand my business. You understand my customers better than anybody else. There's nobody else I'd rather buy from and work with on a certain project, a certain initiative, or a certain market than you, Mr. and Mrs. Distributor. That's what we aim to do here at NAW.
And I think one of the other things that I'm seeing evolve in particularly the wholesale distribution market is that distributors are at least the smart ones, the ones that are having outsized success, that are seeing outsized returns, that are seeing outsized EBITDA margins. Those have shifted away and they've already made the move. They transitioned from being suppliers of SKUs to suppliers of solutions. Mm-hmm. That means putting together bundles and packages that form an entire solution. And what I'm seeing out there also is that increasingly, very rarely is a distributor just a distributor. Very rarely is a manufacturer just a manufacturer. I would say that greater than 50% of the sellers that I work with, the suppliers that I work with, they are hybrids. They are a manufacturer of, say, 10 to 20% of their catalog. They're a distributor of, say, 60% of their catalog. And then maybe they either have their own marketplace or they have a drop ship model for an extra 10 or 20% of their catalog. So they say, okay, cool. We make this part of our catalog. We warehouse locally this portion of our catalog. And for this other portion of our catalog, we just send that order directly to the supplier and they send it directly to the customer of the product. And so the modes of fulfillment, the modes of order taking, the business models that are associated with wholesale distribution now, we're moving away from the pure distribution model where I hold every single SKU in my own warehouse, where I purely procure and distribute a product, to where now I'm saying, okay, there are certain brands, there are certain products, there are certain items in my catalog that I want to take ownership of, that I want to develop, that I want to put my name to, that I want to offer directly to the market because I think I have an opinion on how this product should be made and how it should be distributed. But then there's other parts of the catalog that says, okay, if this is a low moving portion of our catalog, we don't really need to hold it in stock. We need to offer it, but we don't necessarily need to hold it in our own warehouse or have it in our 3PL's warehouse. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, for that small end of town, the slower moving items in our catalog, we're just basically going to take the order and then send it off to the supplier and they can ship it directly. So the modes of fulfillment, the modes of order taking, the channels whereby these distributors are marketing and selling through, they're greater than ever before. We also have the rise of marketplaces. You rightly pointed out Amazon, but now the DC360 estimated that by the end of 2024, which of course has just gone by, they estimated that there would be over 1,000 dedicated, vertical specific B2B marketplaces operating worldwide. Now, this is something that the modern distributor, they can't ignore. They can't ignore the rise of Amazon business. But if they can't even service their existing customers digitally, then how much harder is it going to be for them to integrate with an Amazon or integrate with their favorite local marketplace as a distributor? Becomes very difficult, because if you're not tech savvy, the cost to onboard new channels into your business is sky high, right?
Sure.
Managing orders from those new channels, very complex. Whereas if that is natively integrated into your commerce stack, then you can become truly channel agnostic. But this is something I'm seeing distributors, again, they're starting to realize, geez, okay, I don't offer a procurement service today, but if 25% of my buyers want to originate their orders via an e-procurement system in their ERP, and I don't service them, in some instances, their margins are so low as a buyer that they're going, well, if I need to manually get an order into your hands and I need to manually manage the ordering process, I'm not going to buy from you anymore, because the cost to do business with you is simply too high. And so therefore, I think it's the procurement side and the supply side working in concert together to make each other's lives better and to reduce costs. And I think that once one of these businesses, these distributors, onboard, say, for example, a tool that allows them to connect to 50 different e-procurement systems, not just your Jaggers and your Coupas and your mainstream names, when they can connect to almost at the flick of a switch, if they can integrate with almost any e-procurement system in the world, that effectively to me means they've just opened up new channels for them to sell through easily at very low lift for them and almost zero lift for their buyers. And so therefore, this is as much about not just bringing efficiency, but actually opening up new channels to your business that you were never able to sell through before, simply because you didn't have the tech to be able to make those connections. And I think these are some very exciting conversations to have.
Yeah, a couple of things that you mentioned really hit home. The one thing that we've always seen at NAW for the past 10 years is trying to push our distributors to think more of themselves as a service industry and a service first industry than just somebody that, I use my Mrs. Doubtfire analogy, you just box it and you ship it. And distributors are way more than that. And the one story I'd love to tell that kind of amplifies this is going back to, unfortunately, COVID, in that when the first Trump administration was going to make hospital workers and our first responders the only essential personnel that need to be on the roads in those first waning moments of COVID, it was like, wait a minute, hold on a minute. You can't do that. All of the supply chain, all the distribution needs to be made essential. And our CEO and our chief lobbyist got on the phone with a lot of heads of administrations, and we had to educate them about how, let's say you're in a hospital with 1,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 COVID patients and the air conditioning breaks. The nurses aren't going out to fix the Hitachi or the Carrier air conditioner. The distributor that put it in is going to be able to service that part so that the first responders and the medical professionals can keep us all healthy and safe when we're in such uncertain times.
Or how about the air purification system or the evac system or anything that is required on a daily basis for them to even be able to do their job? Even the mask. What happens if they run out of masks? What happens if they run out of sterile equipment to do surgeries? The reality is that 99% of those products are not sent from a manufacturer to the consumer of those goods. It's a distributor sitting in the middle.
Always. And it almost always, I mean, the direct to consumer, direct to business model doesn't work for 96% of what we consume on a daily basis. Yes, I could go online and get a Cabernet from Napa Valley, but that's very few. But also, I need the expertise. I need the service provided. I need the solutions that maybe me as a consumer or as a business that's consuming products doesn't know. And the distributor is going to be that trusted voice. The distributor is going to say, I know you've always done it this way, Mr. Retailer, but with this new product that we're introducing or this new partner that we have, we're able to lower your cost and make your business stand out amongst the rest in the retail space. That's something that distributors do on a daily and monthly basis with their customers, bringing on new suppliers, like you said, expanding their portfolio in different markets, bringing on different types of offerings and solutions and services to make their existing customers better. So distributors have been at the forefront of transforming how we all consume products and services. And as the distribution industry continues to evolve, more and more distributors are going to be focusing on those additional services type offerings to help their manufacturing and their retail partners really become better at their businesses.
Wow. Incredible. Now, what is on your radar? What do you think over, say, the next 6, 12 months? Is there anything that the NAW doesn't yet do that maybe your membership is asking for? Hey, we'd love you to do XYZ. You do it yet. Will you bring this on in 2025? Or are there any gaps in the market that you see even outside of what your membership is telling you that you go, hey, we don't do this today. We don't fulfill this function today, but we think we should, and we think we can, and we think we will. What's like on your radar in the near term future that as an organization, big opportunities for you to expand your footprint within wholesale distribution?
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a sneak peek here. Number one is you very accurately mentioned that 80% of the people that you deal with are family businesses and family health. One of our board members a couple of years ago came to me at one of our executive summits and said, NAW does a phenomenal job putting CEOs primarily and C-suite executives and leaders of like size, non-competing peers together for best practice sharing and types of networking that is very different that we get from Vistage or YPO or our traditional trades that are really impactful on our buyer side, but not so much on the business of distribution, whereby if I'm the CEO of Graybar and I'm the CEO of ABC Supply, both of them might be calling on contractors, but they're not really competitors in the way that they're selling what their solutions are, yet they're a billion plus type company. So for them to have a networking session with a $200 million or a $20 million distributor, that's not really advantageous for those executives. So what NAW did last year was we launched a family business forum for those CEOs and owners of family businesses to talk about succession planning, to talk about technology adoption, to talk about market segments, to talk about how they're dealing with financials and different trusts and different ways that if you, let's say you're a third generation and the fourth generation is not in the business. Okay, what are you going to do? Sell to your competitor? Go to a private equity shop? Go to an ESOP? There are so many different ways that leaders of family businesses, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, Jason. These are not small companies. Granted, if you're a $50 million distributor, that's a big company. But NAW, kind of our target market, is all of distribution, but a lot of the larger entities that are out there in the distribution space find value in what we do in those kind of very unique networking opportunities. So we started that with a very small kind of forum. We had over a dozen CEOs participate. They all looked at me at the end of this and they said, you have to do this again. So that's something that we're going to be expanding on in October at the Intercontinental in Minnesota. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is something that I've never seen before. So NAW prides itself on some of our thought leadership throughout the years, our Facing the Forces of Change manual, if you would, that started in 1982, has been what a lot of our CEOs and C-suite executives have said, the Bible of distribution. Because if you want to know anything regarding trends, regarding workforce, regarding what the future of distribution looks like, this is where people turn. Now, in January of last year, NAW made our first acquisition ever, and we acquired Modern Distribution Management. This organization had editorial expertise, research, reporting, digital summits that NAW couldn't execute on by ourselves. But because of their focus and their trust in the distribution space, it was a natural fit for them to join us as a growing organization. So when we looked at what's going on with the distribution space, and we looked at how distributors are ingesting technology and information, we said, I wonder if we could create our own AI. And I wonder what it would look like if somebody had a question about a distributor that did roofing tiles and how they were dealing with drop shipping, and a distributor that was dealing with a procurement executive and saying, how can I grow blue space by 20%? And instead of going to ChatGPT or some of the generative AI tools, they would be an NAW member, go to naw.org, whether it's on their phone, on their tablet, on their desktop, wherever, and just go into an NAW page that says, this is what I'm looking to do. And the AI tool would be able to surface Management Academy sessions, NAW publications, MDM articles, different websites that we might have relationships with. And right there in a moment of seconds, the distributor would be able to have specific distribution, not information, Jason. You and I have access to information like we've never had before, but actual distribution intelligence at your fingertips. That's something that is really powerful. And our education team is really close on launching something very cool.
Wow. So basically, a modern distribution consultant at your fingertips by being a member of the NAW.
I don't know about being a consultant, because the life experience that you bring to the table and some of the other consultants that I work with on a day-to-day basis bring to the table, I think is sometimes invaluable. But with, like you said, the millennials and the Gen Zs, how they ingest information at a rate that we've never seen before. Having the ability to be an NAW member and have specific B2B distribution intelligence at your fingertips that is focused on your specific business, I think could be a game changer for this industry, not for the next 5 to 10 years, but for the next 20 to 30 years.
Wow. And you guys expect to be able to launch that this year?
I would come to the executive summit if I were you.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Absolutely incredible. Man, this has been such an incredible conversation. Hour is absolutely blasted by. You clearly passionate about this space. You clearly know your stuff. I've really enjoyed it. It's been very insightful for me. I'm sure it will be very insightful for my audience. If people want to get a hold of you, I'll drop your LinkedIn link in the show notes. I'll drop the NAW link in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to talk to you, if they're in the distribution space or contemplating going into the distribution space, how's the best way to get a hold of you and have that conversation?
LinkedIn is definitely the best way. My email is also very easy. It's aisenberg@naw.org. Having been in this space for the better part of 12 years, when I first came into this space, Jason, and I didn't know anything about distribution. I didn't know anything about distribution. And as I got to know our members and as I got to know this industry, I became fully confident that this industry, above everything else, needs the biggest PR push I've ever seen in my life. Because if somebody came to me and said at 22, 23 years old, when you graduate from college and you don't know what you want to do, I don't know what I wanted to do. And they said, Adam, if you're willing to give us 5 years, maybe 6 years, put your head down and do a really good job, we can make you a C-level executive, earning 6 figures, living anywhere you want in the country, doing whatever you want to do. Finance, technology, HR, strategy, sales, procurement, marketing, operations, anything you want to do. We have it here in distribution, and it can't be outsourced. And it's just going to get better over time as technology becomes more implementatable. What do you think? Sign me up. Sign me up right now.
Yeah.
And that's why I think NAW has such a staying power and such a growth trajectory, like a hockey stick, like we've seen over the past 30 months with Eric Hopland at our helm and our executive leadership team and the people that we continue to attract throughout the industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. For the first half, 3/4 of my career, I was focused on B2C and D2C. Then latterly, when I look back across my career, every single project that I was involved with, it was the most challenging, the most fun, the most exciting, the most engaging. They were all B2B projects. They were all, and a significant portion of those were dealing with distribution. And how do we modernize these distribution businesses and take them forward and keep them relevant as of 2025? How can we make them as relevant today as when they were founded, in some cases 50, 75, 100 years ago? How can we keep them relevant today through the deployment of smart technology that makes them more efficient, but more importantly, gives their customers a better experience? So I couldn't agree with you more. It's a super, super exciting space to be in. I love it. I wake up every single day thrilled to do what I do and speaking with these distributors about how to improve their businesses at the end of the day. And to see in the retail sector, it would be unthinkable, right? It would be unthinkable to start a new retail business and not offer e-commerce. There are still a tremendous amount of distributors that have yet to digitally transform. They might have little pockets of it in their business, and the ERP is still the beating heart of all these distribution businesses. But the reality is, sometimes they just don't know what they don't know. And to see eyes light up around a boardroom table when you explain to them what is available now from a technology perspective that is targeted and tailored specifically for their industry, and they didn't even know that technology existed. They literally did not know this was possible. They said they'll tell me, "Hey, we'd like to do this and this." Great, we've got a technology that can help with that. Really? Is there technology out there that can do this? You don't have to build it from scratch. You don't have to completely customize this for me. There's something off the shelf that can do this for me. Absolutely blows them away. And I get a smile on my face every single time that connection, the light bulbs go on, and I see everybody's face around the table light up and go, wow, there's stuff out there for us. That's incredible. That's amazing. So listen, I really appreciate your time. This has been a heck of a lot of fun. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. So, Mr. Adam Eisenberg from NAW, what is your question for me today?
So, Jason, the one question that I have for you is, in your illustrious career throughout the years, what has been the one thing that you say is effervescent with the clients that you continue to communicate and work with? Is it something on the technology space? Is it something in the people space? What is it that keeps coming back and reiterating itself in different forms throughout either your years and or your different client interactions?
There's two that leap to mind immediately. One is product data and quality of product data and organization of product data, especially for distributors, is still in some cases absolutely abysmal. And it's understandable. If you've got 1 million SKUs or 5 million SKUs in your catalog, to make sure that they've all got photos, to make sure they've all got spec sheets, to make sure they've got all got MSDSs, exploded drawings, application data, cross-reference data, filter data, to make sure that we are able to merchandise products at distribution as effectively as they do in retail, that's still a lagging thing in the distribution space. And so oftentimes when I first start consulting with these distributors, I ask them to give me a cross sample of 10 to 50 products. Show me what your product data looks like. What does it look like? What attributes do you have? How is it organized? What does your categorization look like? Then I do the exact same thing with customer data. Say, give me 10 samples of your customer data. What does that look like? What do the hierarchies look like? What attributes do you have around your customers? What data are you capturing about what they want and what they buy and how frequently they buy and all these different things? How are we going to organize this data to translate this physical experience that you deliver today into a digital equivalent, but better? And do we have the tools? Do we have the data to even be able to make that happen? Or do we need to do a stepping stone project to get us there? Maybe it's the implementation of a PIM system to help you organize this data and to create a minimum level of enrichment before we send a product into a print catalog or into a digital channel. Then the second thing is, when I go in, usually, even if there's been a mandate from leadership to do this digital thing and to implement e-com or punch out or whatever it is, oftentimes these distributors haven't yet had the conversation with their customer or even internally around adoption planning. So they haven't asked their customers, what are the one or two things that you really love about doing business with us? And what are the one or two things that makes it really difficult to do business with us? What are the one or two things that if we could make those things better would just make your experience with us 1,000% better?
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. Hey, thank you so much.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.